Rachel Pipan, thank you so much for joining Speak Bold. How are you?
I am so great, Sarah. Really happy to be here. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And I've got to assume, having gone to American University, you probably know a few of my friends. I know some alums from there, but you are well out of college, have been in the crypto space for a while. You work with Stronghold. So let's just get a little bit of background on what you do and why you do it.
Absolutely. We definitely know a lot of the same people. That's where I started my career, was in Washington, D.C. It is just a small town in a lot of ways. And the journey of how I started working with Stronghold it does begin there. I was at a huge PR agency in graduate school, American at the same time. And my job was to pitch journalists about news, right? Just cold call, cold email. For someone who's slightly introverted but also extroverted, it's both the best and hardest job. And I was pitching a journalist about a piece of financial news, and someone was donating money to the refugee crisis, and they wanted press about it. I called a journalist, I believe it was a journalist from The Guardian, and I told them about the news. Do you want to cover it? And they said, this fintech and a lot of others take a lot of money from refugees and their fees, and said in not so polite a tone, take me off your list. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have done something wrong. What happened? Of course, my boss is not worried. And they're like, it's fine. It happens all the time. But I started looking into it. I didn't know what remittances were. I actually didn't know a lot about payments. And as you start to research, you realize, wow, all of that's really true. And what came up as a way around it was Bitcoin and digital currencies. And so I started reading about it. And I mean, kismet to the max. 2 weeks later, I got a job offer to join a Bitcoin miner turned blockchain company. And they said, don't worry, Bitcoin isn't terrorist money. It's like, oh no, I know, I'm on board. If it means I get yelled at by less journalists because I'm pitching them something that isn't good for the human race, I'm there. And so began doing PR for that company. Years later, now have my own agency, and we get to work with companies like Stronghold and others that are in this space to tell a better story and kind of correct some of those misconceptions.
So let's talk about the agency that you founded. When did it happen, and how did you want to set it up perhaps differently than what you had experienced in the past?
Totally. So we founded it in 2020. COVID. Everyone thought, are you sure you want to leave your safe European job? Because I'd moved to Amsterdam at this point to do this. And I said, yes, I do, because there's stories. We're being approached. Crypto is growing, Web3 is growing, also other emerging technologies, because we don't work just within Web3. It's happening, and I wanted to be a part of that. And I have now recruited this amazing, passionate team of strong writers, and they also wanted to tell better and more interesting stories. And so that's what we founded. But I think what we wanted to immediately do differently was to tell stories that journalists want to hear, and that they are required to cover. I think what I began my career doing was, here is a tree. If this tree is very important to my client, please write about it. But journalists are tasked with seeing the whole forest and telling us about the whole forest and how it's going to affect our jobs and our livelihoods and our salaries and geopolitics even. So you need to help them find that forest and report on it, not just say, no, this tree is like really cool, I promise. And so when I started building and hiring my team, I said, we're not telling bad stories. We're not shilling products. We're talking about people, and we're talking about trends. And that's why, again, we were so excited to work with Stronghold, because Stronghold isn't just a company that says, we have a product. Like, we are trying to make finance better, more accessible, more inclusive. That applies worldwide, and journalists care about that.
Well, as a journalist, you are absolutely right. There are lots of bad PR pitches out there. I get them every day. And at many times, it would be a full-time job for me to explain why to some of the folks that pitch me about stuff that's never going to get covered, why this just isn't the approach that I need. Today, you've obviously learned a lot because you have a lot of experience in the PR and marketing space. What are some lessons that you've learned along the way? Besides that first phone call with the Guardian reporter, who was a little abrupt to you, what do you feel like PR should be going in the direction of?
Totally. And I have a lot of time for that Guardian reporter because they taught me the first big lesson, which is if you don't treat someone like a human, you're definitely not going to get a human response back. And that's
Uh-huh.
what I wish a lot of PR people knew is like email like a human, call like a human, DM on Twitter like a human. At the end of the day, it is a person who has a boss and maybe wants to stop working at 6 and has other things to do. You're showing up in their inbox or wherever it is you're messaging them, asking, I mean, not just for a favor, but asking for attention. So if you haven't taken the time to personalize, research that person at all, but even just send a note like you would want to receive, why would they be polite back, or frankly, why would they respond? And so yeah, if you aren't
Uh-huh.
getting responses, take a look at how are you speaking to them, because they are humans and they have a huge task on their hands. And on top of that is the other thing I've learned is not only do they have this responsibility to report on the world, but they're up against it in that there's all this other content that people can put out. So companies can be putting out, blogs and Twitter threads and spaces and etc. And they're also having to sift through to see if that's real. So again, they have a really hard job, and some companies unfortunately are doing their best to maybe hide some information from them. So just show up like a real person and be helpful. And if you at all get that feeling that this feels sort of like a shill or doesn't feel good, or I feel like I might be wasting their time, you have to listen to that feeling because you're probably
Uh-huh.
right. And if you're going to prioritize, I sent the email versus I approached this journalist like a human, I know which one actually delivers results, but also feels better to do at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. And then you can form a relationship where communication can happen down
Yeah,
the road, and that person already knows that you're doing a good thing. You're bringing good content to them.
totally. Totally. I like that you said the word relationship because I think that's something else that's changed recently. I think when we'll sometimes get clients that want to work with us, like, do you have relationships with these journalists? It's like, well, yeah, we have a working relationship. I said, we send them good information. We work with them. We're responsive. We're kind. But this is not a relationship where I can call them and strong arm them to like, you have to write about this or place this. I don't know
Sure.
that. I mean, maybe that relationship still exists in other markets with other people, but I would never expect that of the people that we work with. So I think that's something else that's changed. I wish more PR people knew. It's not about creating relationships that you can manipulate. It's creating relationships that are built on mutual respect.
So I know the bigger companies have in-house communications teams. Think Meta, for example. I mean, there's probably 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
How do you forge relationships with a company like Stronghold, for example? How did that come to be?
And we came to work with Stronghold and build this relationship because they didn't yet have this large department. And that's a fair amount of the people we work with. We call them visionaries. They are visionaries. Tammy Camp is a visionary. Sean Bennett is a visionary. And they need to focus on scaling and growing their business. But their business may yet not be at a size where they need even one communications or PR person. Or maybe they have one, but they don't need 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. You don't need to just bring on that many team and onboard. What if you want to move quickly? So that's what we do. We come in to say, you go do what you need to do as a leader. We will come in and be your fractional communications department. You don't need us full time. You need us to help with the things that you need help with. And then where we need you, of course, you can come in and approve or share your thoughts for an op-ed that we want to place and things like that. But that works really well with the people we work with because you have so much on your plate as a founder. I know as a founder, and my company isn't as big as Strongholds. Like you have admin and HR and growth on your mind. You don't always want to
Payroll.
review social posts, payroll. Exactly. You don't want to look at social posts or every press release, with a magnifying glass. So you get all of the expertise of a senior to junior to senior, and then you get the workload of a junior department, but you don't have to immediately hire them. But a lot of people graduate as we work with them, they realize the power of communications and marketing, and then they add a person and add a person. And that's lovely for us because then we get to continue just focusing on where there's still gaps.
So let's talk a little bit about crypto, Web3, blockchain, all of the terms. What do you think is the biggest misconception today about what it is that these companies are trying to do?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about what these companies are trying to do in the Web3 and crypto space is that they want to break everything. And when I say break everything, I mean, I think there's a big feeling in in mainstream that they are trying to get rid of all banks. They're trying to get rid of all payments that is anything centralized. They're trying to get rid of, Hollywood. Like there's so many applications of this technology, and it feels like they want a whole new world. Now, to be fair, there's definitely a group of that, who say like this whole system is broken, let's redo it. But a much larger percentage of them are realists and people who realize that the systems that we humans have built work. They just need to work better, and they need to be fair and more transparent and more secure. So let's layer in, add on, improve, but not throw, the baby out with the bathwater. I think in 2016, when I got into the space, there was a few voices saying, we don't have to break everything. We're just going to add blockchain, and we're going to add crypto, and we're going to add, stable coins into layers the humans already use. So when I send money to you, you won't even know that it's using these rails, but it gets there faster and maybe it's a bit cheaper. How nice for you. Now that's a mainstream opinion, but at the time it wasn't. It was no, we don't want that. We want something brand new. But now the space has grown so much. We've matured so much. Most of us are really not trying to break things. We're just trying to make them better. So when we, get upset about regulation or have questions, or, go share op-eds about, what we can all be doing better, it is really coming from a place of, please let us help improve what we're doing.
Yeah, and some of the recent news, Silicon Valley Bank comes to mind as an institution that fell on quite hard times, but that's bank stuff, and it's happened before. So yeah. I can only assume somebody who works in your space is like, we know that it's not a perfect system already. We know this.
Yeah.
We don't want banks to fail. We want banks to be better. We want people who bank with these institutions to feel safe about their money. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who go, yeah, FDIC, we're safe. And that's not necessarily the case because of a lot that's going on behind the scenes, and not everybody is a financial expert. So it seems to me that the narrative of teaching people about the future of crypto and what can be achieved with crypto is pure education. We're all better for it. Whether or not people want to engage is up to them.
Absolutely. And I think the Silicon Valley Bank is a great example of how much we don't know. And when I began my journey after my Guardian phone call experience, reading the Bitcoin white paper and then going online and trying to find more, I had that same moment, which is, wait, what is money? Like, what is money? Because why does Bitcoin have value? Why does money have value? And it's you kind of get your eyes open to the meta layer happening around you, which is, oh, there's a huge system here, and you can't learn it all at once. You have to start, in small pieces. And I think that's what Silicon Valley Bank showed a lot of people, and not even just startup founders, although there are some amazing founders who really stepped up and made payroll from their own bank accounts, worked all weekend to get money to where they needed to go, really outstanding. But some of the employees at maybe those startups who weren't sure if they were going to get payroll, they didn't know this about banks. They didn't know about FDIC insurance. So now we're all rapidly Googling, figuring out, okay, what is this and what does it mean? What should we do? And that's what crypto and Web3 has been trying to do for a long time, which is, hey guys, here's a list of maybe 10 things in our financial system that are not resilient. Can we fix them? But again, because, we might have thought, no, it is resilient. It's fine. It's safe. It's good. It felt like they were the kind of loud people in the corner trying to break something that wasn't broken. But they saw the forest for the trees. They saw, no. It is a bit broken. Please let us fix it. And that's where I think where we need to get to a little bit more is accepting that there might be more stuff that's a little bit broken. And let's fix it before we have another Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, absolutely. When you are explaining this to people, when do you use the term crypto? When do you use Web3? And is there a situation where you don't use either of those terms when trying to get somebody to wrap their head around, okay, this is a possible future that could benefit you.
Of course. Yeah, Web3 I tend to use as it's just the next generation, next version of the internet. It's all of the technology. So if you hear Web3, someone could be talking about crypto, they could be talking about NFTs, they could be talking about the metaverse, they could be talking about AI. So it's that, all of those technologies are Web3, right? But not crypto is not the same thing as AI. It's not the same thing as NFTs. So when you think about the world we're going into, your digital experiences, that's Web3. I use crypto when we're speaking specifically about like a digital currency, like an asset. And I think cryptocurrency, though, is a bit scary. We see a lot more like digital currency, digital asset. And so you use them interchangeably depending on who you're speaking with. But again, someone might think, oh, cryptocurrency is scary, but they're very okay with USDC by Circle, a stablecoin. Amazing, incredible innovation. If I call it a stablecoin, they're fine. But if I call it, oh, it's a cryptocurrency, they might get a bit nervous. So it's really, PR is all about reading the room and making sure you use terms that people understand and are friendly with.
Yeah. In fact, I can think of, I don't know, the stereotype crypto bro. You hear it all the time. And you know what someone means when they use that term. And it's not a good thing. It's like calling somebody a frat bro. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with being in a fraternity, but you end up getting the stereotype that then is kind of propagated, and it starts to at least scare some people off. In communications, how do you deal with something like that when you feel like someone's kind of pushing back?
Completely. What we like to do is bring it out into the open, which is, I know you're probably thinking crypto bro or crypto hack or ransomware. And it's all about, we know what's been reported and how those terms have been used, both positively and negatively. So you say, what is your feeling about this word? Or do you have questions about it? Or maybe let's use another term. But it's also, I think, in our space, we like to say, oh, crypto shouldn't have that reputation. Crypto is great. It's like, it happens. Someone watches like one TV show where someone gets like ransomware Bitcoin hacked, and then they think Bitcoin's sketchy for the rest of their lives. Like it's not a flaw of humans. It's just not all of us can be experts in everything. So I think meeting it with less impatience and more understanding, like they have not been around so many great crypto pioneers as I have. So maybe they don't have the same positive experience. That's fine. I can work on it with them, or it costs me nothing to just use a different term if it means that our conversation is going to continue to move forward. Not everyone liked the word blockchain when it came out. Like, Sarah, when I say blockchain, does that scream efficiency to you?
I mean, yeah, I report on technology news and have for a long time, and I still have to check myself when I'm like, okay, do I understand what's going on here? Am I going to explain this to the next person in a way that is helpful to them, and doesn't make me look foolish? Happens all the time, but it's a rapidly changing universe. So I know you have your work cut out for you, but this is also what you do. So, let's talk a little bit about the relationship with Stronghold. What, besides the fact that you obviously have a great working relationship, what stands out to you in the company that works better, that people need to know about?
I think what everyone needs to know about Stronghold is they are a forest for the trees kind of company. They are not coming in to say you should stop using your bank or you should stop using this other fintech, or ACH is dead, move to something else, which a lot of companies do, right? They say we are a disruptor, we're the insert technology here killer, and that means you need to stop using that and start using us. And that's motivating if you think you're missing out. But again, as a business owner, the last thing you want is someone coming into your inbox saying, everything you're doing is wrong, stop using that, move to this. And I think Stronghold said, like, that is not, first of all, that's not great. That's not nice. That's just not realistic when every technology, every payment rail has a different benefit. So whoever you are, whatever your business is, let's talk about it and let's find something that works for you. It could be ACH. It could be credit cards. Maybe you have everything else figured out and you just want a better checkout system. There's something for you. And I love that. I feel like you will probably also know this, Sarah. How many pitches do you get where someone is just saying, we are the one, the only, the best. What we've created is peerless. And how many times is that actually true? Wouldn't it be
Right.
cooler if you just gave people lots of options? Isn't that nicer as a small business owner? I think so.
When you work with companies, and obviously having founded your own firm, there's probably companies that come to you. Maybe they're referred to you, or you're referred to them. However, you end up finding folks who need your expertise. Are there situations, even if they work in your space, that you say, I don't think it's a good match?
Completely. We have turned down and not worked with clients who we just didn't think were building a future we wanted to be a part of. And I won't, I don't need to like go into
Of
exactly who
course.
they are, what they do, but when we think about the future that we want to be in, it's a more accessible, easy to use financial system. It's, a more inclusive online experience, period, Wi-Fi access, going into the metaverse, etc. So it's just, if we think, what you're creating is just don't love it, there's plenty of other agencies out there for you, which is great. I think the other area where we are resistant or reluctant to begin working is if a technology is really cool and the founders are great and what they're creating is wonderful, but they think the way that they are explaining and bringing to the world is fine. And in many ways it could be, right? And so that's not necessarily our place. If you are going for a very technical audience, what you're doing is perfect for them, superb, you don't really need us. But where we will be reluctant to work maybe with a company is if they say, well, here's what we do, and we just need press, or we just need attention, we just need to be speaking on stages. And we look at it, so like, I don't see the forest here. What's the global
Uh-huh.
trend? Why should someone care? What's that emotional layer? Or that I call them like sprinkles, right? Emotional sprinkle that gets somebody to look at you and say, oh, that does speak to me as a human. And so all of the companies we work with, all of the founders, so many people that come to us know they're missing that. They're like, we have created something and it works, but it takes me 15 minutes to explain it, why it matters. Like,
Yeah.
great, we can fix that. But if someone says we don't need that emotional layer, it's like, well, that's gonna be really hard for me to send this to a journalist without getting that icky feeling, because I'm gonna
Right.
know
It's
that
like
they're
they
not
have
gonna
to
like
let
it.
you help them, or you can't
Totally.
help them. Right.
Mhm.
Right. We all go through that, but yeah, it's certainly in the space where there's so much informational the informational context is of utmost importance, because that you're often explaining something to somebody who's just not wrapped their head around it before. Now, in the situation of the journalist from The Guardian that you talked to however many years ago saying, you should really look this up, there's more to the story. Sure, that happens. But I think for many people who can get the word out about companies like Stronghold and others that you work with, there's a lot of explanation and why this is better, why this isn't scary, why you should give it another look and not just throw the email in the trash type thing. I wanted
Right.
to go back to my comment about crypto bros,
Yeah.
because it's I don't like the term. I know a lot of people who work in the Web3 space, not just cryptocurrency, but the Web3 space in general. And there's a lot of disdain, I guess, from people. Again, I think largely comes from a place of not understanding. Or thinking, yeah, a bunch of hackers and they're going to ruin the system that I feel comfortable with. But it also assumes that these are kind of financial men who are running the show. Now, clearly, anybody who works in this space knows that that's not the case. But what are your feelings about that perception and how we change it? Is it just we get more women to be involved and then they can't be ignored? Or, is there something more to it?
I think we let the crypto bros have the term. You can have it. They definitely exist. They're real. We'll take Web3 women, right? Crypto bro over here,
There you
Web3
go.
women over here, because they exist, right? And I know exactly what you mean in this disdain and the idea that there's these like crypto bro financial men like running the whole system. And I can really say from working with so many amazing, outstanding female founders in crypto and Web3, it's because these women are busy. They're
Mm-hmm.
busy building companies and creating products and scaling that they aren't always on Twitter and they aren't always promoting themselves, right? They're not on LinkedIn. They're not like pushing to put themselves like on CNBC because their responsibility they know is to their company and what they're creating. But then what happens, right, is this you're doing, but then when you go to raise your next round or you have an announcement, well, people say, I haven't heard of you. Where are your awards? Where are your
Mm-hmm.
news stories? Like, I am not sure that you're real. Whereas a crypto bro who has been pushing and putting themselves out there, even if they haven't built something that great, looks more legitimate and looks more involved in the system just because they've been more vocal. I've always said like the women are just they're building, and that's why what we wanted to do. Like, great, keep building. That shouldn't kneecap your company's future success because you're so responsible. Let somebody else help you with this promotion because
Mm-hmm.
they're there and they're doing it. And I think, you know, in my job at the Bitcoin miner, we hosted a summit every year, 40 people, very curated. And, when I came in, my goal was to make it equal, 50-50 men and women. Not hard given the amount of women in what was then crypto, now we know as Web3. But it
Mm-hmm.
really requires just doing that extra layer of searching, asking one more person for a recommendation from your network, and not letting a guest list immediately get filled with people who are big on Twitter. And the first year, I would say, was hard because it was an adjustment and doing this extra layer of research. But then we got these women attending. They're now Sheila Warren, who was on the Speak Bold podcast. She's now at CCI. She was one of these invitees, Elizabeth Rossiello, as a finance, which is a great Pan-African fintech. We bring them in, and then they recommend other amazing women for years ongoing. And so then it became very easy, but you had to start somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
it just, again, digging through some white papers and repeatedly asking, nope, please don't send me another guy's Twitter handle. Send me someone else. And then we found these women. And so then it just got easier and easier. So there's plenty of Web3 women. Yes, we can be doing more to promote them, but let's not punish them for responsibly building their companies.
Yeah. You hard worker. How dare
How
you?
dare you?
Yeah. So we're talking about gender, but let's talk about location. Your company is based in Amsterdam. That's where you live. I'm going to assume you're American. But why did you choose the Netherlands? And how do you feel that serves you the best?
I love the Netherlands. I love living there so much. I moved there 5 years ago. Initially I moved there selfishly because I was working with this global Bitcoin company. And when I woke up at 6 a.m. to have my coffee, and I'm a morning person, but I'm a quiet morning person, they'd see I was online and be like, "Oh, great, you're awake. Here's all the things we need help with." And I was like, "I love you guys, but before 7 is a bit
Let me have
aggressive."
my
So I was like,
coffee.
"Can I?" I know, like, then I'll respond to you and I'll be nicer, I promise. So I was like, "Can I move? Can I move so I'm on the same time zone?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, great." Or I guess maybe they thought maybe an American didn't want to move to Europe. I was like, "No, please, like, I'll go." I'd lived abroad as a kid. My dad worked for NATO, so I was like, "This is great. I'll move to Europe. I'll have my coffee, and then we'll be productive." But when I left that job and I was founding Maneuvre, I could have moved back to the States and founded it here. In a lot of ways, it would have been easier. But I love the approach of Europe because I think what's happening in emerging tech, deep tech, is incredible. So there are some really interesting and cool companies coming out of Europe. And the investor scene is very interesting. But I do think there's a healthier approach to work. So we work really hard and we work really hard for our clients. But I think there is way less weekend emergency. And when there is a weekend emergency, it is a capital E emergency. And I love that because in PR, that can happen at any time. Something, wrong news, crisis, you need to come in and handle it. But my team is healthier, balanced, better at their job because they save that energy for a big crisis.
Uh-huh.
But then they like stop working on the weekend. And I love that. And that's what we want. And I think just Europe has a bit more. Like it's Easter tomorrow in Europe. Email's been quieter from our European clients. And I think that's fair. Like if you're really changing the world in biotech, agricultural tech, deep tech, Web3, etc., you need your energy. So please take a weekend. And I think
There you
Europe has
go.
that a bit better than the US for now. I'm confident. I think we'll get there.
Well,
Americans,
Rachel,
fellow
you're not the
Americans.
only one who feels that way. Definitely not. I've got some friends who live in Amsterdam as well, and it seems like a pretty nice place to live and work. So I don't blame you for having been there 5 years and strong at this point. However, depending on where you are in the world, especially with Web3 regulatory issues. They vary.
Completely.
They change real quick. I'm pretty up on how U.S. politicians sometimes fear it to the point where they say, "Oh, let's just not do this," or is it a security versus it's
Yeah.
the
Dicey.
conversation pieces. How do you deal with clients who may be operating in various parts of the world and have to be able to be nimble and shift with the times?
Yeah. I think how we support them is we are also nimble. Like if our startup, we've had people say, "Hey, we don't want to do anything in the US for the next 6 months, speaking, pitching, etc. We're just going to be very careful and be in Europe." Like, great. Let's do that. I don't think we are not so slow that we say, well, we have to unwind this for 3 weeks. And then, no, we just pivot alongside you. And that's how we like working with startups because we like being that agile as well.
Uh-huh.
And then the other thing we do and what we encourage our founders, portfolio of founders to do is, stay up to date, but when you can't, let us help you. And so that way you can spot these trends coming earlier. So that way you can be not only just adjusting your business to deal with it, but you can be that expert voice because you've already crafted an opinion. You already know what's happening. There was a great report out 2 weeks ago, which released during Paris Blockchain Week from Rockaway X, which talked about venture funding in European crypto startups. The TLDR is venture funding in European crypto startups is increasing dramatically. And that tells me that means their smart money has already been looking to Europe for a long time versus the US. And so startups based there or moving there are going to have an easier time getting investment. And so when we brought this to some of our founders, some of them, knew this. They knew they'd been getting more European investor interest. So I think, a lot of them pivoted well to say, okay, we need to be focusing more on Europe. And they made that decision 8-12 months ago. So when you have access to information, you have that, just do it. But then what we do is we share these reports and say, how are you doing this? And do you want to comment on it? You should be commenting on it because you're perfectly positioned to do so.
Uh-huh.
The US, we will. I have full confidence it will improve. There are smart people working on it.
Definitely. Many smart people, for sure. We'll get it together. Last question for you. What advice do you have for someone who says, Rachel, I love the idea of your job. I think I could do this too. I'd like to get into communication for this Web3 space.
Apply. Maneuvre.co.
To start?
Truly. I would say my piece of advice for someone who wants to get into communications in the Web3 space, and I imagine, speaking to that human, it's because you think the technology is cool and you think there are stories to be told, and you're absolutely right. So don't lose sight of that. And there are plenty of job opportunities. There are job boards, but also go read CoinDesk, go subscribe to newsletters. And there's one for every region, by the way. You're based in LATAM. Brazil Crypto Report does plenty across the whole continent, run by Aaron Stanley, formerly of CoinDesk. Read, find the companies that are doing something cool, and then apply. I have to say, I know there's big recession energy at the minute, but there are a lot of Web3 companies that every time they come to us to ask for our help, they're like, we also want to hire someone on top of hiring you. Do you have anybody? It's like, if I did, I would probably hire them. but the demand is there for good writers, strong storytellers, people who want to do this reading and bring that context and help. Um, you just they maybe are not always posting on LinkedIn because, like I said, that founder is busy doing 10 other jobs. So go to their company website, reach out to them and say, like, can I help? I love what you're doing.
Well, Rachel Pipan, Managing Director and founder of Maneuvre, thank you so much for joining us on Speak Bold.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. It was great to be here.